Bitcoin's been stuck in the mud for the past 15 days, more or less not really moving. And the question of the day is the exchange staff selling against us? Those bastards are trading against us once again. And if you don't understand the reference, well, you missed a pretty fun live stream. Anyways, on a more serious topic, I do want to go over some setups that have emerged for Bitcoin in the past 24 to 48 hours and the statistics that go alongside those as well. And what else? And then just some regular technicals, as well as, of course, our sale that's going on, which you can get 20% off of any one of the programs or services in the Teachable link in the description below with the code SUMMER and 20. Summer in all capitals and then the number 20. Anyways, yes, let's start off with Bitcoin. Let's start off with the setup. In fact, I have it on my screen right here. And this is a very, very simple setup. We've spoken about kind of variations of this one in the past, and it is effectively looking at this cross between this red moving average right here and the yellow moving average right there. Whenever that happens, typically we see at least a move somewhere down to that green moving average. And all of these moving averages, while you're likely familiar with them from my from prior videos, I actually have changed them around for this particular setup, and we're using a 3 EMA for the lowest period red one. We're using a yellow 21, so that one's actually quite standard, and then the green one is actually going to be a 70 EMA. So this particular setup, like I said, has led to a test down to that green 55, or sorry, green 70 EMA. It's like stuck in my head, right? Very, very, very often. In fact, if we were to back test this, the strategy itself is not going to be a profitable one, to be fair, but the amount of times that we've actually seen Bitcoin reach that 70 EMA after those two moving averages is crossed has been just under 78% of the time. So that is, like, well, in my opinion, quite significant. And when we go over to the current price action, we can see that this one actually fired off very recently right here. So as of right now, Bitcoin, or sorry, not Bitcoin, but the 70 EMA, that green moving average, is all the way down just below 99,000 bucks. Of course, it's going to inch its way up with each and every passing daily closure. But I do want to now reference the strategy tester and look at the trade analysis. And we can see that the average amount of bars in winning trades, which my face is actually covering up this category right here, is 10. So again, these are averages. There's going to be some variance around them. However, seeing as we saw this one fire off very recently, 10 days away from that entry would put us where? That would put us in the 10th of June. So next Tuesday, basically. And so could we be expecting, something resembling a move like that, somewhere down around to, at that point, it's probably a little bit above 99,000 bucks, to be fair, within the next week or so? Yeah, I'd say that that's rather a high probability given this setup right here. What essentially would invalidate it, it's not going to be super helpful in this case, but Bitcoin getting back above that May 27th high would certainly do it for me. Until then, the trend is your friend on the downs on the daily time frame, and it is indeed a very short term and not super strong downtrend, but it is indeed present. So I did want to call that one out. Again, playing this setup, as an actual automated setup would not be advised. It would not be good, as you can see right here. Again, we're using the Quant Prime service to back test this one, but just for general analysis purpose and just for generally get an idea of where we kind of expect price to go within about the next week or so. Still downside bias does remain here, and potentially all the way down to that major moving average. So just keep that in mind. We've seen this play out many, 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 many times in the past, and like I said, effectively almost an 80% strike rate is something that typically I'm going to favor. I'll put it that way. Anyways, yes, so moving on from there, I did want to also relate this data and that timing with the Bitcoin June lows date data that we went over, I think it was about a week ago, where we saw that even during positive closing Junes, we actually see the low of June come in relatively later in the month compared to most of the months. So during positive closing Junes, the average day that the low comes in is actually day number 7. And in several cases, we've actually seen that come in on the end of the second week of June. So, if we go with that number, obviously 7 is still a few days ahead of us, still rather close to that date, to be fair. But if Bitcoin were to go out all the way into day number 13 or day number 14, well, of course, that would be, let's see exactly where that would be. Day number 14 would be 14 days out from that initial signal, and day number 13 obviously would be the 13th of June, from that particular signal, as that one actually did fire off quite literally on the 31st of May. So, do those two things correlate with each other? Yeah, and it does also imply that if you are going to be bullish for the month of June, it's effectively expecting Bitcoin to close green for the whole month of June. We kind of expect the first week or two to be generally down, and for Bitcoin to find a low somewhere between the end of the first week and the beginning of the second week. So I think that actually rather fits in quite well with this data over here. Again, we're going off of averages, so there will be variance within there, but there's probably a margin of of error of a few days within that. So ultimately, anywhere around that date, like I said, next Tuesday, or basically next week, which is the second week of this beautiful month of June. Not so beautiful here, by the way, but probably in your part of the world it is. Well, that's kind of the time that I'm looking for a low of this month if it is going to be indeed bullish. Anyways, moving on from there, I did want to go over here and reference the 5-day, the 5-day price action pivot, which, by the way, we actually just had a nice update for the price action pivot. There's V1.5 available now. You can see that it actually draws out these trend lines. It's not super helpful in this time frame right here, but actually I was watching this a lot last night, and on lower term time frames, it's like super useful, especially for, people who want to be scalping. Anyways, you can actually claim that as its own indicator. It's going to be separate from the original price action pivots indicator. And you can claim it in the exact same way that you claimed, the first one, which is just through the Crown Quant, or the Crown website there. KQA is what we refer to it as. And again, all of these things, not only are they 20% off right now, but you can actually just try them out for 7 days free, including the price action pivots. You can see if it's relevant to your interests or not. And actually, I'm having a lot of fun with this new update. It's broadened upon a lot of new ideas for potential trade setups, which we're actually working on in the background now for integrating into the Quant Prime service, just to see, what sort of nonsense can we get up to here. Anyways, yes. So anyways, my point is that the 5-day time frame, again, still living below that most recent price action pivot, which is effectively 110,000 US dollars on CME, that is. And you can see that Bitcoin, traded up into there in the past couple of weeks, rejected. That's kind of what you would expect on that. And again, that is the big bad boss to essentially clear before you're going to hear me say, hey, whatever pullback, I was looking for originally, that is no longer viable, and get ready for Bitcoin to move up. Probably 120-ish region, maybe more than that. Definitely possible. But again, I still lean towards a short-term correction with more medium and long-term upside implied, most likely from here, at least as of right now. Anyways, also, I did want to go over the confluence here between this particular setup's target, which again is right around about 99,000 bucks, and the monthly 5 EMA here, because the monthly 5 EMA, as you can see, is where it's actually a little bit lower than there. It's about 98,000 bucks right now, but anywhere around there is fair game. And we typically do expect a reconnect with that major moving average, this red one right here, pretty much on each and every closure. Doesn't always happen, but when it doesn't happen, like you see right here, price action more or less trades sideways until it does reconnect. So, if Bitcoin were to take off from here, I really don't expect, it to be like significant until you get that reconnect, and then perhaps it launches up. And looking at the price action pivots extended trend lines here, just by the way, this current month, if Bitcoin were to trade back up towards this level, that would actually be 126,000 bucks. In July, that goes all the way up to 130. In August, that goes up to 134. In September, that goes all the way up to 137, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of see a path forwards. Anyways, long-term Bitcoin bullish as long as it's above the monthly 5 EMA, but it can afford a pullback. That's kind of my main point here. And after a pretty impressive run to the upside of 7 straight green dildos in a row, is it reasonable to be expecting maybe a little bit of short-term downside? Can Bitcoin afford a little bit of short-term downside and still put in another higher low? Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, if and when that does happen, that does make me a little bit more convicted that this market cycle will go on at least a little bit longer than what I first considered. Anyways, yes. Okay, so we got that. Let's move on to the next thing. 5-day time frame over here on the HPDR. Another thing suggesting retest somewhere around that median, as we do see volatility cool off for the first time since this run really began. And typically when we see volatility go into a contraction phase, you're going to get a reconnect with that median. As of right now, it's 99,000 bucks. We're going to see another update for upon tonight's closure when the 5-day ends yet again. And what will happen at that point? Well, I imagine it probably shift up a little bit here, but again, that's going to be a natural area of interest, and very much aligns with that effectively $99,000 region, give or take $1,000 from that number, as an area of interest for a bit of a pullback. Anyways, yes, okay. On top of all of this, I did want to just briefly go over the higher term time frame stochastic momentum pivots here, because again, we haven't really seen anything significant change just yet, and as it stands right now, daily time frame continues to the downside. By the way, also breaking as of last night on CME, this trend line regression that has been holding in the lows since March, actually early March. This one has officially broken as of last night, so a little bit of a change of behavior there. 2-day time frame is also going to be coming down, now below the critical zone. That one closes officially tonight. The 3-day time frame is also going to be positioned to the downside, as long as Bitcoin's below almost $109,000. The 5-day time frame, which just closed last night for CME, is now all the way up in the critical zone. It actually will not really turn down on this next closure, or at least probably not. 97,400 is the number to beat. However, I should identify and acknowledge that the 5-day time frame for spot price action right here actually has or is hinting at across to the downside as of right now. And this one will be closing, by the way, later tonight, and that one is pivoted at $110,000. So Bitcoin below 110,000 tonight. Again, just kind of greases the probabilities even more in favor of a bit of a short-term pullback, with opportunities to the downside. Anyways, yes, okay. All of that is pretty much what I wanted to go over today. Just continuation of this thread of analysis. If we're looking at the very, very, very short-term timeframes, we got that short-term rally that we were looking for yesterday and the day prior, retested about that same region, 106.5 to 107-ish region. As long as Bitcoin's below there, I do look for this to be essentially resolved to the downside in the short term, retesting the lows of Monday. I don't know if that's super relevant to anyone who's not on the very, very low-term timeframes, but yeah, that's effectively what I'd be looking for right there. On top of that, we should go check in on the quantum wave bands really, really quickly here. By the way, that probably should have showed this first. Hey, by the way, that's actually the sale code for 20% off, in case you don't know how to spell. But yeah, the quantum wave bands. Hey, what the fuck? Oh, Else is closing the door. I thought there was some sort of a ghost. Anyways, yeah, quantum wave bands here. We all know that back in May they went on just a crazy fucking run. Also in April as well, getting like 6 or 7 wins in a row. In late May and early June, we have seen it finally take a few losses here. In fact, one pretty damn big one actually. So that definitely does happen. For the people who have been joining this one newer in the past month, just want to show you, yes, even though it was a really, really good time, there will be losses, obviously. Of course, these typically are followed by wins, which we already see a few good ones over here, as well as these ones over here. But just showing the strategy tester, you can see pretty clearly that long-term, the edge is there. And most importantly, that equity curve, despite that pretty massive loss from, I think it was earlier this week or late last week, these are just data points at the end of the day. And as long as this thing continues up and to the right, we're happy. And in this case, yes, there is a dip that will happen. Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's 100% win rate. In fact, this one is very far away from 100% win rate, as are most strategies. In fact, this one at just over 68%. So ultimately, just wanted to show that to especially newer people. And again, you can actually even get the quantum wave bands for 20% off as well. All right, cool. That's enough shilling for one day. Hopefully those damn exchange staff stop their heinous activities. And I think we'll end things on that note. I do want to say massive thank you for joining in. As always, take care, much love, and see you hopefully Thursday.